You're almost about to listen to Improvisations to Go. But I need to tell you something first. You wouldn't be able to hear it without the generous support of Dr. Craig and Debbie Jarvis and their fabulous hunting poodle, yes, hunting poodle, Curly Sue. Also thanks to Aubrey's Restaurant. It's delicious, so get it to go.
One of the great ironies of jazz is that it's a music that was primarily created by African Americans, and they were the ones who were denied the liberties, the right to, the great words that are in our Declaration of Independence and Constitution. They were denied those rights and privileges, and they came up with a music that best embodies what democracy is, right? The simple definition of democracy is everyone has a voice, and you work together for the overall. An oversimplification of what it is. But that's how jazz is. Everyone gets an opportunity to solo if they would like, but it's all about what is the group accomplishing. So everyone has to work together, and that's why this band here really embodies that. It's not just everybody standing up, look, it's about me and it's about what are we trying to achieve collectively. And that's the great gift, not only to the world, but especially to America, that the African people, the African descendants came together and said, we want to grant you this gift. And that's what it is. It's a gift.
It is a gift. And this is Improvisations to Go, a podcast dedicated to exploring that gift, to tasting, appreciating, and trying to dance to the gift of this beautiful, uniquely American music. I'm Todd Steed. I'll be your guide as we visit several great American cities to see how and where jazz is cooking. Along the way, we'll make some friends, check out the local eats, raid a few record stores, and take time to deeply listen to the folks that consider the cities we visit their home. Even if you're not a jazz fan yet, I think you'll enjoy this trip. That voice you heard, keeping it real in the intro, is Delfeayo Marsalis of the Marsalis family. Yes, that Marsalis family. He's also the leader of the Uptown Jazz Orchestra, an extraordinary New Orleans big band playing just one floor below the dressing room at Snug Harbor, a jazz institution in New Orleans. If you're looking for recommendations in New Orleans, there's one for you. Delfeayo plays trombone in the band, unless of course he's upstairs in the dressing room trying very carefully to explain democracy, race, and jazz and New Orleans to a travel-worn guy that just got off a train. Jazz started in New Orleans, and why not? Our podcast should too. I didn't get there walking like Fats Domino did. I took a train called the City of New Orleans. More about that and New Orleans itself, but first, a quick side trip to Africa. Simply stated, there's no jazz without New Orleans, and there's no New Orleans without Africa. That music you just heard was from Kermit Ruffins, doing his take on an African pop song from Zimbabwe called Skokian. That's from his recording Live at Vaughn's. Vaughn's is a real place. It's a neighborhood bar. Some would call it a dive. Others would call it a shrine. Others might find it indescribable. Maybe I'm in all three camps. I don't know if this has ever happened to you, but there have been moments in my life where I've been visited without planning by this sort of indescribable joy and lightness. I remember the first time this happened. It was opening day of Little League in 1974. I'm facing 15-foot phenom Rusty Enzer on the mound. He has I think it was like 123 mile an hour fastball. If I close my eyes, I can almost see it. And here's the first pitch from 15-foot tall phenom Rusty Enzer. It's a fastball down the middle. Steed yanks it to left field. He's headed towards first, and he's getting greedy. Going towards second, he slides in. He's safe. Yeah, getting that double was one of those moments. And it got even better when I rounded second base, and I looked up, and I saw my dad smiling at me. Brief memories of undescribable joy. And this one. In 2002, I was walking around Louis Armstrong Park in New Orleans, and I found this radio station called WWOZ. Louis Armstrong Park is in what was once Congo Square, which is basically where jazz started, and at one time was inhabited by Native Americans who considered the site sacred. I still do. So I walked into that radio station with my dog. They fed the dog, and I said, "Where should I go tonight?" They said, "It's Thursday, Kermit Ruffins, Vaughn's, go." So I took the dog back to the hotel. My wife and I jumped in a cab and went to Vaughn's in Bywater. The drive down did not look promising. It was kind of a dilapidated section at that time. And we pull up to Vaughn's, which is really just an old house. We walk in, and everyone is having more fun than anyone else. There's barbecue cooking, people are drinking but not over-drinking, and the entirety of the world is in there. There are people from Japan, there are people from Holland, there are people from 2 blocks away. The rich, the poor, the not-so-sure, the tourists, the locals. Everybody's in there and in there for the same reason. They really want to enjoy this incredible music. Kermit Ruffins walks in this cloud of smoke. He fires up the band. The piano player must be 90 years old. And from that first downbeat, everyone just gets into it. And they're dancing and they're laughing. And all of a sudden, all those labels, rich, poor, white, black, international, local, tourist, for one brief moment, we all just shed those labels and become one with this incredible music. It might sound a little corny, it might sound like I'm making it up, but it was real. And as much music as I've heard in my life, nothing has ever reached down and grabbed me like that. Whatever worries, whatever stress I might have brought in, I couldn't find it. When we left Vaughn's, I remember thinking, where does this music come from? And why does it sound so damn good? Certainly, the direct influence of Africa has to be figured in, but there's so much more going on. How does it all connect? Well, don't ask me, I'm just a radio host. Maybe a real-life professor could help us here. Enter Dr. Michael White. Recording artist, world traveler, and ambassador for jazz, he also plays the clarinet and composes wonderful New Orleans traditional music. He teaches a course at Xavier called African American Music. I asked him, what do your students find the most surprising when they take this course?
Well, I enjoy teaching African American music at Xavier University. I've been teaching that now for over 30 years. And what I like to do with the class is make it relate to not only the music, but people's individual lives, and also show them parallels about things that are going on today. So we talk a lot about, the history of the music. I like to show them things like what are some of the African retentions in America today, in Black culture today. And they're really surprised to see that, because a lot of times people feel a disconnect, Black people, with Africa, and they're surprised to find that there are transformations and aspects of African culture that are still with us today. And we talk about everything from food like gumbo to the structure of shotgun houses to things like, we have people all over America now saying, who that, who that say they're going to beat them Saints, and the dat, is a transformation, because the TH sound, wasn't a part of the language of the Africans who were enslaved that came over. So the D sound, when people say that, these, them, who that, that is part of Africa alive. When you look at football today, you see people dancing and celebrating in the end zone. So the concept of celebration is a whole another kind of retention of African heritage. And certainly in New Orleans today, we have a lot of things that have African roots that have been transformed that a lot of people don't necessarily recognize as African. The way we dance, the second line, that dance itself, the concept of that dance, jazz music with its improvisation and its combination of individuality and collectivism, use of paraphernalia like the umbrellas, the handkerchief waving and things like that go back to West African traditions. So a lot of times the students are surprised to find out about those kind of things. And also we talk about things like how elements of the music have stayed alive today in popular music, in rhythm and blues, rock and roll, rap, etc. And we also talk about elements like technology, how technology has helped or influenced the growth and popularity of certain musical styles. So I try to make the music alive for the students, where they can kind of see that it's not just talking about something that happened in the past, but how what happened in the past affects music and life today. So they see that in their own lives, so they're very surprised about some of those things.
African influence is everywhere in the United States. But why did New Orleans become, well, New Orleans and say not Macon or Mobile or Minneapolis?
I feel very strongly that there are things that separate out the experience here.
He feels very strongly about a lot of things. That's to say, he really loves a lot of things, especially New Orleans culture. That's Nick Spitzer, folklorist and host of one of my all-time favorite radio programs, American Roots.
I mean, this was the largest port in the U.S. after New York prior to the Civil War. The Civil War was devastating to the economy, but because it was culturally different, it was so strongly African, Caribbean, Catholic, Spanish, and Native. And within that Latinate world, culture was preserved in new and interesting ways that led to improvisation, that led to places like Congo Square, where tradition was in public earshot and public view, and where I would argue jazz begins in its strongest roots and forms, and still remains in a sense of folk music shared by lots of local people, but is aware of the global growth of jazz partly from New Orleans. And so because of the cultural difference, the Catholicism, the francité, the creolité, the proximity to the Caribbean, and the relative isolation from the rest of the South by all the water, and all the lowlands, and certainly the rest of the country down at the bottom of the Mississippi River, culture has had a chance to continue to thrive, to grow. We're not perfect in terms of all of our social relations, but things are vastly improved over the years. And there's a lot of cultural sharing and intimacy here. Just look at the people and what they look like. And look at how people collaborate across lines of culture, race and class historically, and the beginnings of jazz, which have, high tone sides in the quadrille, and also have, the street beat and the Afro-Caribbean. And so a lot of that is still here. And so we have an advantage in the sense that there is continuity of culture and history here that makes it possible to have a music scene that's quite diverse, from trad jazz to hip hop and bounce that sounds different than other places, to many great singers, songwriters, and other kinds of performers. Lots of clubs, obviously carnival, St. Joseph Day. Go to a Saints game, there's Mardi Gras Indians and brass bands. I mean, it's everywhere. Not to mention Jazz Fest, of course, and French Quarter Fest. So these are things that have been kind of cooking for really 300 years now.
When I talked to Delfeayo Marsalis, he also hit on that history pipe and brought it back to the future.
New Orleans is more of an American community. And the big difference, I believe, is that we've maintained more of the African culture and more of the African traditions that go way back. And, the whole idea of the Southern gentleman, that's an African thing. The whole idea of speaking to people and the community, the communal aspect of things. So I would say, fortunately, we were settled by the Spanish and then the French, and not the British. Because the British, first of all, they don't like music in general. Like, we say, man, you look at all the European countries, and they had these great composers, and then, Britain, they had Handel, who was a German transplant, and then he had a beef with the Queen, so they nixed on him. They were like, not for this music. But anyway, I think that it's definitely the Africans, and the fact that the French and the Spanish embraced the African drums, and they embraced Africanism, as opposed to other places where there was fear of, certain aspects of African culture. So that's what I say 100%. And the idea that we always say, why do people come to New Orleans? The music. We say, yeah, it's not German. The dance. Say, yeah, it's not Irish. The food is not English, mate. All these things that we love is a direct tie to the motherland. And what we're trying to do with our band is to keep that tradition, those great traditions, those things that really make you feel good inside out. We're trying to keep that alive.
If you really want to dig deep into the history, you must visit the New Orleans Jazz Museum right down by the French Quarter. On the day I was there was an entire exhibit on drumming in New Orleans. I sat down with the museum's curator, David Cunion, to talk about drums and New Orleans music and other things.
Drumming in New Orleans, I mean, when you look at the history of the fact that everywhere else in the country, drums were taken away from the enslaved Africans, except for here, where for most of the times of slavery, slaves were allowed to have drums and allowed to play them one day a week and Sundays, in assorted places, and then it kind of got narrowed down to Congo Square. Because of that, because also of the different cultures that have, kind of come here from Europe and from Africa, whether forced or not, there are lots of different drumming traditions here, and they all have kind of, they're all separate, and they also have all kind of combined into a New Orleans, tradition of putting, drums behind jazz or rhythm and blues. And so many of the great influential and pioneering drummers have come out of here. Baby Dodds, who basically is the guy who invented how to play jazz, the first guy to really kind of codify and invent how to play jazz drums, to Earl Palmer, who, if you want to say what makes rhythm and blues go into rock and roll, it's the way Earl Palmer changed the drumming styles, to the guys who were, someone like Zigaboo Modelist, who totally changed funk drumming, and the guy, and all the kind of, guys who are credited for developing funk drumming who aren't from here listen to the guys from here and listen to the guys behind Fats Domino, Earl Palmer, and Tunu Coleman, and folks like that. And then, and it continues. There's an entire, amazing. I mean, I could go start today naming the great drummers and be here till tomorrow, who are gone, but also, I can do the same thing for the guys who are still here and who are still great. From, for everyone from Ernie Ellie to Stanton Moore, Herlin Riley to Shannon Powell. I mean, all sorts of, Zig's still around. All sorts of people are still playing. So.
And that is what strikes me so much in New Orleans, that line has not been broken. The past, evolved as it may be, is still alive, and it still sounds real, because it is. And you can still see it if you got $20. You can have a great time in Philadelphia and never eat a cheesesteak, and you can have a blast in San Francisco and never cross the Golden Gate Bridge. You can get a really good feel for Knoxville without riding up the Sun Sphere. But you probably shouldn't go to the French Quarter in New Orleans without visiting Preservation Hall. This tiny little place on St. Peter hosts authentic New Orleans music 350 nights a year. In fact, one of the few times they shut down is during Mardi Gras. This is based on, I presume, good sense. Actually, they told me the musicians don't like dealing with the traffic. Let's go back several decades. There was an art gallery here owned by a guy named Larry. And Larry loved New Orleans music. And when he opened up his art gallery, which was his dream, he realized, I can't go see music anymore. I'm always in this art gallery. So he kept the gallery open, but he started inviting New Orleans musicians to come in and practice there. And we're talking some real heavyweights of New Orleans jazz: George Lewis, Punch Miller, Sweet Emma Barrett. Folks who at that time were losing gigs to rock and roll music that was starting to sweep the country in the 50s. Eventually, a couple on their honeymoon, Alan and Sandra Jaffe, came in and saw the place and fell in love with it, and eventually took it over, making sure that it was racially integrated on the stage and in the audience. And this wasn't very common in New Orleans in those days, or anywhere really. So of course I have to go to Preservation Hall. But before that, I felt myself getting a little bit hangry. And I popped into a place about, a block away, forget the name, but they had a player piano in there, which always says two things to me. Number one, they don't want to pay a living musician. Number two, I'm probably about to hear some Billy Joel and Tiny Dancer, whether I want to or not. I kind of did want to hear Tiny Dancer, actually. So for $10, they serve up gumbo in a rather offensive and bland styrofoam bowl. What was inside the styrofoam was the complete opposite of styrofoam. With my primal eating needs taken care of, I walked down to Preservation Hall, and there it was. Really, it's just a hole in the wall. But what a hole in the wall. What history in that little tiny place. Before you go in, they make you line up outside and they go over the rules, and there are a lot of rules. The first rule sent the Ohio tourist into a panic. There will be no alcohol in Preservation Hall. But then they had a clause that you can bring your own. Okay, Ohio people happy. Number 2, no photographs. And most importantly, they don't even want to see your damn phone. I was down with all of it. I was gumbo powered. The class system of ticket buying is really everywhere now, even here. And when they finally opened the doors, there were about 25 people already sitting there in their chairs. That's right, for $20 more, you get in before everybody else and you get your own wooden chair. Yeah, a wooden chair is really nice, but I could use that $20 later for more gumbo, so I happily stood in the back, where the music reaches you, I don't know, maybe 1/1000th of a second later. But boy, when it gets there, does it reach you. Everybody's just sort of chatting, waiting for something to happen, and then these old guys walk out and take their chairs. There's no light show, there's no sound system, there's no cheesy video montage in the background. It's just this music. And when the music's this good, it's more than enough. It's everything. At least everything you need for 55 minutes. Once they hit the last note, we all filed out together. And I'm telling you, the world you re-enter after being in Preservation Hall doesn't look exactly the same as the world you pass through to get in there. Preservation Hall gave me what I would call maybe a perfect New Orleans evening. Should be enough for any rational person, but this is New Orleans and I'm not rational, so let's go do more. Next stop, Frenchmen Street. Frenchmen Street is where I'm going to see Delfeayo Marsalis and the Uptown Jazz Orchestra at Snug Harbor, a great listening room that's heavy on musical quality. Frenchmen Street is kind of like Asheville, North Carolina, or Santa Fe, New Mexico, in that it started out as this hip little scene mostly for locals until people like me kept coming in and taking it over because we wanted to be around the locals that we eventually run off. I talked to Jan Ramsey from Offbeat Magazine about this. Her office is on Frenchmen Street, above a record store, naturally.
Well, Frenchmen Street's changed a lot, and we've been in this office for 20 years. And it's changed a whole lot from the way it used to be. Frenchmen Street used to be the place where local people would go to listen to music, okay? And it's not that way anymore. Frenchmen Street is still a music street, but it's become more of a party street, more like a bourbon street, but based around music. Bourbon's kind of based around, it does have music, yes it does, but there's the naughty factor the naughty factor and the party factor, right? And that wasn't the way Frenchmen Street was. Frenchmen was all about music. And over the years, it's changed. You can stand outside, okay, and listen to music and not have to pay to get in. So the party has moved out onto the street, which means that nobody's ever going to go in and pay a cover, okay? Because the restaurants will say, oh, well, we can't charge a cover. You say, they don't want to charge a cover. They want people to come in and out and drink and eat, But the ones who get screwed are the musicians. And the ones that also get screwed are the local people who used to come down here who don't give a damn about the party in the street. They want to go listen to the music. And also local people don't want to hang out with tourists. Go figure.
Well, this tourist didn't take the trolley, by the way. I took Fats Domino's advice and I walked to Frenchmen Street. And man, I was hungry, but I didn't have a lot of time to eat. I had a show to go catch. No worries. Enter Frenchman Grocery and Deli, a real nondescript place I had no interest in going in until I literally smelled it when I walked by. There was some crazy, spicy smelling thing coming out the front door that just pulled me in like a magnet. I didn't know what to do really, so I just followed the smell till it took me to the back of the grocery store. And there was a kitchen back there and a bunch of people cooking food. And I walked up and I said, I'm in a hurry and I'm really hungry. Make me something delicious. And he laughed and said, okay. We never talked about the name of the dish or how much it would cost. It was all understood everything was going to be okay. So they sat me down on top of a milk crate. They brought out this stir-fried something or another and put it on top of a bunch of boxes of baked beans. And I just sat there and soaked that food up and relaxed. And I realized, hey, this is where the locals eat and buy beer and buy cigarettes and catch up and talk about the weather and talk about the music. People were coming and people were going. Everybody knew everybody. I just sat there and watched the show, and I thought, this is the second best show I've seen this evening. So, after my second meal, I was ready for more jazz. I walked across the street to Snug Harbor to catch the Uptown Jazz Orchestra. That's Delfeayo Marsalis' band. In this group, they've got Roger Lewis on baritone sax, and he also played with Fats Domino. That's right, Fats Domino. How many people that aren't dead can say they played with Fats Domino? The Uptown Jazz Orchestra smoked for 2 sets. Delfeayo skipped the first set, so I took that opportunity to talk to him as the band swung hard downstairs. First of all, the band sounds absolutely smoking.
Oh yeah, they do. And the drummer, it's his second gig with us. He's 21 years old, and fortunately for him, he just dropped out of Loyola University. So, he is the real education begins now. So, really a great, and his father's a trumpeter, a great New Orleans trumpeter, Shamar Allen, and his name is Jarrell Allen. So we're looking forward to him growing and developing in the band.
How do you think he's doing on gig 2?
He's doing really good. I mean, the funny thing is he sat in with us maybe some point last year, and I didn't hear it at all. But about 2 months ago, 2 to 3, probably 2 months ago, I had a small group gig, and we couldn't find a drummer. So we called him up, and then I noticed that there was some growth. So I said to him, I had it was every Tuesday night. So I said to him, go learn Max Roach drum solos on Charlie Parker's recording Now's the Time. He came back the next week, and he knew 2 of the solos, which seldom happens. It's almost never you tell a youngster, go learn this, and they come back and he learned them. And so I said, all right, I gave him some more assignments, and he's growing tremendously. But I think a lot of people don't realize with jazz, there's this kind of this misconception that you can become great on your own. And that's just not the way it works. So for him, for any musician, you need your peer, you need people around you to help you to grow. So kind of I see my function the same as Elvin Jones when I was in his band, or Art Blakey, or Slide Hampton. The older musicians are the more seasoned veterans, giving the youngsters an opportunity. So that's what we're trying to do here.
And he couldn't have any better teachers, right? He's got 14 teachers in this group, so a founding member of Dirty Dozen, and I mean that's a heck of a legacy just right up there on that stage.
Right. And the thing about this band is we want to bring the fun and the funk back to jazz. We want people to know that this is first and foremost an entertainment music. So if you're feeling bad, you come to our show, you're gonna leave in a good mood. Somebody once said, man, you have a feel-good band, and I said, why would you want to be anything else?
It is, and I mean, there's joy is kind of an underused commodity in music, I think, considering if you go back historically, joy was all in it. Right.
And next year is the 100th anniversary of Charlie Parker, and I have a couple of different projects. So I'm working with the students, and I ask everywhere I go, every school, I ask the students, what is the single most impressive thing about Charlie Parker? And the answer always comes back either his technique or his ability to play fast. When to me, the greatness of Charlie Parker was, number one, every note that he played had a sound of joy and celebration. Every note he played really was designed to put the listener in a good mood or in a better mood.
After I walked out of Snug Harbor, I was beat. 3 shows, 2 dinners, about 6 miles of walking, getting lost, getting found. Yep, I was done. Finished. Enough. Until I heard a brass band playing Christmas New Orleans Swing on the Street. walked through a Frenchmen Street haze of decriminalized smoke, and I asked a simple question to myself. Todd, have you really overdone it? Are you really tired? Have you had a complete New Orleans evening? Why, you have not even danced yet, you lame tourist who wants to think that he's not a lame tourist. Well, I certainly wasn't going to be the only one not dancing on Frenchmen Street. I don't remember what time I got in, but I knew it was late, and I knew I had to get up early the next morning to meet Kermit Ruffins at his bar, no less. So, next episode, we'll see you at Kermit Ruffins' bar in the morning. That episode is called Picnic State of Mind. This is Improvisations to Go.
Improvisations to Go is a production of WUOT. Original music for this podcast was created by Daniel Kimbrough, Hunter Deacon, David Dayub, and Todd Steed claims he was in there somewhere too. This episode featured the music of Kermit Ruffins, Aurora Neeland and the Royal Roses, the Uptown Jazz Orchestra, and Dr. Michael White. If you love the music you hear on this podcast, please feel free to support it in whatever manner you deem appropriate. If you don't like the music on this podcast, don't tell anybody. Improvisations to Go exists because of the generosity of Dr. Craig and Debbie Jarvis, not to mention Curly Sue, the only confirmed hunting poodle in East Tennessee. Thanks for the beautiful support of the following spectacular places to wine and dine: Aubrey's, Sunspot, Drink, and Bistro by the Tracks. According to Todd Steed, this podcast was written and produced by Todd Steed. You'll have to take his word for it. I'm Chrissy Kuiper. That, I can pretty much assure you, is 100% true.